It's a funny thing about expensive suits. Put one on a white man, he's a captain of industry, a titan of finance. Put that exact same suit, tailored by the same hands on London's Savile Row, on a black man, well, he must have stolen it. He's probably an athlete or a rapper, someone with new money and no class. He certainly couldn't have earned it through boardroom battles and late-night genius, and he most definitely does not belong in seat 1A. Some people just need to learn their place, right? Just wait until you hear what happened when they tried to teach that lesson to the wrong man. The hum of the international terminal at JFK was a familiar symphony to Marcus Thorne. It was a chaotic orchestra of rolling luggage, multilingual announcements, and the faint, ever-present scent of jet fuel and overpriced coffee. For Marcus, CEO of the rapidly ascending tech firm Nexus Innovations, it was simply the sound of progress. He stood near the boarding area for Aerovista Flight 788 to London Heathrow, a picture of understated elegance. His suit was a deep charcoal Tom Ford, tailored to perfection. His shoes were polished John Lobbs, and the platinum watch on his wrist was a Patek Philippe, a gift to himself after Nexus's IPO had exceeded all expectations. He wasn't flashy. The suit was classic, the watch discreet. He preferred quiet competence to loud proclamations of wealth. At 42, Marcus had cultivated an aura of unshakable calm, a necessary armor in the brutal arenas of Silicon Valley and Wall Street, where he had fought and won battles that would have broken lesser men. He was on his way to London to finalize the largest acquisition in his company's history, a multi-billion-dollar merger with a British AI firm that would solidify Nexus as a global leader. The Gate area was a microcosm of society. Business travelers typed furiously on laptops, families tried to corral restless children, and young couples took selfies, excitement buzzing around them. Marcus checked the time on his phone, his expression placid. His first-class ticket, purchased months in advance, was secure in his digital wallet. Seat 1A. He always chose 1A. It was a creature of habit, a small anchor of consistency in a life of constant motion. The call for first-class passengers to board echoed through the terminal. Marcus slid his phone into his breast pocket, picked up his sleek leather carry-on, and joined the short priority queue. He was the third person in line. In front of him, a gray-haired couple in matching beige travel vests were fussing with their passports. Behind him, a young man was loudly detailing his stock market wins into his phone. When Marcus reached the podium, he presented his phone, the screen displaying the bright, clear QR code of his boarding pass. The gate agent, a woman in her late 50s with a helmet of sprayed blonde hair and a name tag that read, Brenda, glanced at the phone, then up at Marcus. Her eyes did a quick, dismissive sweep, from his face down the expensive suit to his shoes and back up again. A flicker of something cold and unpleasant passed through her gaze. It was a look Marcus knew well. It was the look of recalibration, of a mind trying to reconcile a black face with a first-class ticket. Passport, she said, her voice flat, devoid of the cheerful politeness she had offered the couple ahead of him. Marcus handed over his American passport. Brenda Gable took it, her fingers seeming to recoil slightly as if the leather cover were distasteful. She opened it and studied his photo, then looked back at him, her lips pursed into a thin line of suspicion. She scanned the passport, then the boarding pass on his phone. The scanner beeped affirmatively, but Brenda didn't move. She didn't hand him back his passport. Instead, she typed something into her computer, her nails making sharp, aggressive clicking sounds on the keyboard. "There seems to be a problem, sir," she announced, her voice now carrying a distinct edge of satisfaction. Marcus kept his own voice level. "Oh, I wasn't aware of any issue. The flight appears to be on time." "The flight is fine," Brenda clarified, drawing the words out as if speaking to a child. "The seat is the issue. There's a discrepancy in the system. I'm not seeing this seat assignment as confirmed." Marcus felt a familiar, weary tightening in his chest. He had played this game before, in different airports, at different hotel check-in desks, outside different exclusive restaurants. He knew the rules. The first rule was to never, ever lose your temper. "That's strange," he said, his voice a study in polite curiosity. "I have the confirmation email here, and the charge certainly went through on my corporate card. Perhaps you could double-check. The name is Thorne." Marcus Thorne. I know the name, sir. It's right here. She tapped his passport with a long, red-painted nail. And the system says there's an issue. It happens. Technology. She gave a phony, tight-lipped smile. Behind him, the young stock market prodigy was starting to huff with impatience. Hey, can we speed this up? Some of us have planes to catch. Brenda shot the young man a look of solidarity before turning her attention back to Marcus. Sir, you're holding up the line. I can put you in a seat in Economy Plus, and you can take it up with customer service later for a partial refund. The offer was delivered with an air of finality, as if she were doing him a great favor. She was testing him. She expected him to argue, to raise his voice, to make a scene. She wanted him to conform to the stereotype she had already locked him into. Marcus would do no such thing. No, thank you, he said, his voice still infuriatingly calm. I've purchased seat 1A. The contract of carriage is quite clear. I'd appreciate it if you could honor it. If there's a system error, I'm sure a supervisor can help you sort it out. Brenda's fake smile vanished, replaced by a concrete mask of irritation. I am the lead agent here, sir. There's no one else to call. The seat is not available. Now, are you going to board, or are you going to continue to delay this flight for everyone else? The accusation hung in the air, a deliberate attempt to turn the other passengers against him. Marcus glanced back at the line. A few people looked annoyed. Others were studiously avoiding eye contact. No one spoke up. They never did. He knew this was a pointless battle. She held all the power in this small, carpeted kingdom. To fight her here was to lose, but yielding completely was not in his nature. Let me be clear, Marcus said, his voice dropping slightly, but gaining an intensity that made Brenda blink. I am not the one delaying this flight. The delay is being caused by your refusal to honor a confirmed ticket. I will not be taking an economy seat. I will, however, step aside so that others may board while you find a way to resolve your airline's technical issue. He gave her a cool, level stare, then took a single step to the side, away from the podium. He folded his arms, his posture relaxed but resolute. He had ceded the ground, but not the war. He was now a silent, well-dressed sentinel, a visible problem she could not simply wish away. Brenda's face flushed a blotchy, angry red. She glared at him for a moment before turning to the next passenger with a saccharine sweet, "So sorry for that delay. Welcome aboard." Marcus watched as the rest of the first class and business class passengers shuffled past. Some shot him curious glances, others looks of pity or scorn. He ignored them all. He wasn't performing for them. His focus was on the bigger picture. This was no longer about a seat. It was about principle. As the last of the priority passengers disappeared down the jet bridge, he saw Brenda pick up her phone and speak into it in a low, urgent murmur. A few moments later, a flight attendant in the same Aerovista uniform appeared at the end of the jet bridge, peering out at the scene. Marcus recognized the flinty look they shared. The battle was about to move to a new front. The flight attendant who emerged from the jet bridge was a woman named Susan Price. She had the brisk, no-nonsense air of someone who had been managing unruly passengers for 2 decades and had long since run out of patience for any deviation from her routine. She was tall and thin, with sharp features and hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch the skin over her cheekbones. She walked directly to Brenda's podium, and the two women conferred in hushed, conspiratorial tones, both of them occasionally flicking their eyes over to Marcus, who remained motionless by the wall. After a moment, Susan strode over to him, her sensible shoes making soft, authoritative taps on the floor. She stopped a few feet away, adopting a stance of forced sympathy. "Mr. Thorne," she began, her voice smoother than Brenda's but carrying the same condescending undertone. "I'm Susan Price, the purser for this flight. Brenda has explained the situation, and I am so sorry for the mix-up." Marcus inclined his head slightly. "There's no mix-up, Ms. Price. There is a confirmed ticket and a refusal to honor it." Susan's plastic smile tightened. "Well, be that as it may, there has been a last-minute equipment change. A smaller aircraft. The seating configuration is different. Your original seat, 1A, simply doesn't exist on this plane. It's a terrible inconvenience, I know. These things happen." It was a clumsy, transparent lie. Marcus had checked the aircraft type that morning when he confirmed his flight status. A Boeing 777-300E9R, Aerovista's flagship long-haul plane. An equipment change to a smaller aircraft for a flagship route like JFK to Heathrow was virtually unheard of, and if it had happened, the gate screens would be flashing with notifications. They were not. He resisted the urge to call her out on the lie directly. That would only lead to a semantic argument. He needed to control the narrative. An equipment change, Marcus repeated thoughtfully, as if considering the possibility. I see. Then I assume the entire first-class cabin has been affected. How are you reaccommodating the other 7 first-class passengers? Susan's eyes darted away for a fraction of a second, the tell of a poor liar. We've, managed to find suitable arrangements for everyone else. You were the last to check in, I'm afraid. Another lie. He had checked in online 24 hours prior, the moment it opened. He could feel his phone in his pocket, a silent witness holding the proof. The last to check in at the gate, perhaps, Marcus corrected gently, but not the last to check in for the flight. Regardless, what is the suitable arrangement you have for me? As Brenda mentioned, we have a very nice window seat for you in Economy Plus, Susan said, her voice brightening with false cheer. It has extra legroom, and of course, we'd be happy to offer you complimentary cocktails for the duration of the flight, for your trouble. The offer was so insulting it was almost comical. Trading a 14-hour, lie-flat first-class suite, a ticket that cost over $10,000, for a bit of extra legroom and a few free gin and tonics. It was a calculated humiliation. Ms. Price, I appreciate the offer, but I will decline, Marcus said, his calm composure now a weapon. It was unnerving them. They were expecting him to shout, to demand, to fulfill their expectations. His refusal to do so left them on unsteady ground. I will not be flying on this aircraft under those conditions. I will wait for your gate staff to book me on the next available flight to London. In first class, of course, and I will expect a full refund for this ticket, as well as appropriate compensation for the delay, as mandated by federal regulations and your own contract of carriage. Susan and Brenda exchanged another look. This time it was one of pure frustration. They had backed themselves into a corner with their lies. Now they had a well-spoken, impeccably dressed black man calmly quoting regulations at them. Their simple act of racist gatekeeping had become a complicated logistical problem. Sir, if you refuse to board, we'll have to offload your checked luggage, Brenda snapped, her composure finally cracking. That will cause a significant delay for everyone. Then I suggest you get started on that, Marcus replied without missing a beat. Again, the delay is a consequence of your actions, not mine. Suddenly, a new player entered the scene. A man in a pilot's uniform, the captain, emerged from the jet bridge. He had the grizzled, authoritative look of a man used to being in command. What's the holdup, ladies? We need to close the door. Brenda and Susan both started talking at once, a jumble of seat discrepancy, uncooperative passenger, and refusing to board. The captain looked at Marcus, his eyes assessing the situation. He saw the suit, the watch, the calm demeanor. He didn't see a threat. He saw a problem. Sir, the captain said, his voice a low rumble of command, I'm Captain Miller. I need to get this bird in the air. My purser offered you an alternative seat. I suggest you take it. We can sort out the money later. With all due respect, Captain, Marcus said, meeting his gaze evenly, this is no longer about money. It's about an agreement your airline has failed to honor. I will not be bullied into a lesser service than the one I paid for. I will deplane, or rather, not plane, and you can be on your way. A tense silence fell. The captain was clearly not used to being challenged, but Marcus was also used to command, and his boardroom was just as unforgiving as any cockpit. From down the jet bridge, a voice called out, Is there a problem up there? A man in his 60s with a mane of silver hair and a sharp, expensive-looking cashmere blazer was walking back up from the plane's entrance. He had a look of mild annoyance on his face. He was one of the first-class passengers who had boarded earlier. Everything is fine, sir. Please return to your seat, Susan said, trying to wave him back. But the man ignored her. He walked right up to the scrum. I'm in seat 1A, he announced. The purser came and got me from the lounge and escorted me on board personally, said there was a last-minute upgrade available. Is this gentleman the reason we're being held up? He looked at Marcus with undisguised disdain. The puzzle pieces clicked into place for Marcus. They hadn't just denied him his seat. They had given it away to someone else, a white man. They had seen him, profiled him, and decided he was unworthy. Then they had handpicked a replacement who, in their eyes, looked the part. Before Marcus could respond, Brenda spoke up, her voice dripping with venomous sweetness. This gentleman had a ticket for that seat, yes, but it was a system glitch. His ticket wasn't valid. We're trying to find him another spot. This was their final, desperate lie, and it was the one that would unravel everything. Marcus knew he had to act, but not in the way they expected. He gave a small, polite nod. I see. Well, that is most unfortunate. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He didn't turn the camera on the crew or the other passenger. That would be too confrontational. Instead, with a calm, deliberate motion, he angled the phone down as if checking a message and discreetly started recording. He captured a short 10-second video. It showed his feet on the JFK terminal carpet, then panned slightly to show the open door of the jet bridge, the Flight 788 to LHR sign, and, clearly visible inside the aircraft, the man in the cashmere blazer standing near the front, next to the unmistakable bulkhead of Seat 1A. He didn't capture anyone's face. He didn't need to. He just needed proof of the scene. He stopped recording and slid the phone back into his pocket. All right, Marcus said, his voice resonating with a newfound finality. You win. I will not be flying with you today. Please ensure my luggage is removed, and please have your corporate affairs department expect a call from my legal team. He turned not with anger, but with the serene grace of a chess master who sees a checkmate 10 moves away. He walked away from the gate, leaving Captain Miller, Susan, and Brenda standing in stunned silence. They had gotten what they wanted. Marcus Thorne was not getting on their airplane. They thought they had won. They had no idea that they had just armed a Titan and pointed him directly at the heart of their entire company. Marcus didn't walk far. He found a quiet corner of the terminal, away from the frantic energy of the departure gates. He sat down, placed his leather carry-on beside him, and took a deep, centering breath. The anger was there, a cold, hard knot in his stomach, but it was a controlled burn. Anger, for him, was fuel. It had to be channeled, directed, and used with precision. A tantrum at a gate was a waste of energy. A multi-pronged corporate assault was an investment. He took out his phone. His thumb hovered for a moment over his contacts list. There were many people he could call. He could tweet about the experience and let the court of public opinion run wild. He could call a friendly reporter he knew at the Wall Street Journal. But that was scattershot. He needed a surgical strike. His first call was to Eleanor Vance. Eleanor was the chief legal officer of Nexus Innovations, a woman whose reputation in corporate law was legendary. She was a shark in a Chanel suit, brilliant, relentless, and fiercely loyal to Marcus, who had hired her away from a top-tier New York law firm 5 years ago. She answered on the second ring. Marcus, you should be in the air. Change of plans, Eleanor, Marcus said, his voice calm. I was denied boarding on Aerovista 788. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Eleanor knew Marcus. She knew he didn't miss flights. Denied boarding? For what reason? Weather? Mechanical? For the reason you're probably already guessing, he said dryly. Apparently my first-class ticket for Seat 1A was a system glitch. They gave it to another passenger and offered me a middle seat in the back. The silence that followed was heavy with menace. When Eleanor spoke again, her voice had lost all its warmth, replaced by the clipped, dangerous precision of a litigator preparing for battle. Tell me everything, Marcus. Every word, every name, every detail. Don't leave anything out. For the next 10 minutes, Marcus recounted the entire incident. The gate agent, Brenda, the purser, Susan, the lies about the equipment change and his check-in time, the arrival of the other passenger. He was factual, dispassionate, laying out the events like a witness giving a deposition. He concluded by mentioning the short, discreet video he had taken. Send me that video, Eleanor commanded, and the ticket confirmation, the boarding pass, the receipt, everything. I want a complete file. It's on its way, Marcus said, already attaching the files to an email. Good, Eleanor said. Here's what happens next. First, do not speak to anyone from Aerovista. No customer service agent, no manager, no one. Any attempt to contact you is to be routed through my office, understood? Understood. Second, I'm filing 2 separate actions. The first will be a formal complaint with the Department of Transportation, citing violation of 14 CFR Part 250, the rules on oversold baggage. Denying you your seat and giving it to another passenger after you had a confirmed reservation and boarding pass is a textbook case of involuntary denied boarding. They're on the hook for 400% of the one-way fare, up to a maximum of $1,750, but that's just the regulatory slap on the wrist. We're not interested in that. What are we interested in, Eleanor? Marcus asked, a faint smile touching his lips. He loved watching her work. We're interested in the second action, she continued, her voice practically vibrating with predatory glee. A civil suit, Nexus Innovations versus Aerovista Airlines and its parent company. We're suing for breach of contract, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and most importantly, discriminatory practices in violation of the Civil Rights Act. We will argue that their actions were not just poor customer service, but a targeted act of racial discrimination that has directly impacted the business of this corporation by preventing its CEO from attending a critical, time-sensitive meeting for a multi-billion-dollar merger. We will seek punitive damages that will make their shareholders' eyes water. Excellent, Marcus said. I'm assigning our top 3 litigators to this. We're going to request flight manifests, employee records for Brenda Gable and Susan Price, and internal communications. We'll depose every single person involved. We're going to make them bleed for this, Marcus. I have no doubt, he said. Now for the immediate problem. I still need to get to London. Already on it, Eleanor said. I'm on the phone with NetJets right now. A Gulfstream G650 can be ready for you at the private aviation terminal at Teterboro in 90 minutes. It will get you to London City Airport faster than your original flight. The cost will be added to the damages claim against Aerovista. Send the bill for your car to Teterboro to my office. You're a miracle worker, Eleanor. No, she corrected him. I'm just a very well-paid and highly motivated lawyer. Don't talk to anyone. I'll be in touch. She hung up. Marcus felt the cold knot in his stomach begin to loosen. The machine was in motion. He made a second call. This one was to Sir Alistair Finch, the 68-year-old CEO of Omni AI, the British company Nexus was acquiring. Sir Alistair was old-school British industry, a man who valued punctuality and protocol above all else. Marcus, my boy, Sir Alistair's booming voice came through the phone. Thought you were flying the friendly skies. Alistair, good to hear your voice, Marcus said warmly. Hit a bit of a snag. There's been an unforeseen logistical issue with my airline. It appears their operational integrity isn't quite what they advertise. I won't be on the flight we discussed. There was a slight pause. Everything all right? This meeting tomorrow is rather crucial, you know. The press conference is scheduled. The ministers are expecting us. Everything is under control, Marcus reassured him. I've arranged for private transport. My arrival will be delayed by only a few hours. I'll be there in time for our dinner tonight, I promise. But Alistair, I would do me a small favor. Anything, you know that. The corporate travel contract for the new combined entity. I know our teams were finalizing the details. We had Aerovista listed as a preferred carrier for our transatlantic routes. Marcus let the sentence hang in the air. Sir Alistair was sharp. He caught the implication immediately. Did you now? Well, given their logistical issues, perhaps we should reconsider that. Reliability is paramount after all. Can't have our top executives stranded, can we? I'll have my people put a hold on that contract immediately. We'll look at other options. British Airways, perhaps. Much more dependable. An excellent thought, Marcus said. I'll see you at the Savoy for dinner. 8 o'clock. I'll have the good claret decanted. Fly safe, my boy. Marcus hung up. That was a potential $100 million corporate account that Aerovista had just lost. They just didn't know it yet. He made one final call to a man named David Chen at Reuters. David was a sharp, aggressive journalist who had covered Nexus's rise for years. They had a relationship built on mutual respect and carefully curated information. David, Marcus Thorne, I have something for you. Off the record for now, but it might develop into something you'll find interesting. It's a story about corporate culture, specifically at an airline called Aerovista. 45 minutes had now passed since Flight 788 had pushed back from the gate. Marcus was in the back of a black Lincoln Navigator, speeding towards Teterboro Airport. His quiet war room had been dismantled, its orders issued. The pieces were moving on the board. And on board Aerovista Flight 788, now taxiing towards the runway, the chaos he had unleashed was about to begin. Aboard Aerovista Flight 788, a fragile sense of normalcy had settled in. The cabin lights were dim for takeoff, and the safety video was playing on the seatback screens. Susan Price moved through the first-class cabin with a practiced smile, offering pre-departure champagne and orange juice. She felt a smug sense of satisfaction. The problem had been dealt with. The difficult passenger was gone, and the cabin had the correct look now. In seat 1A, the man in the cashmere blazer was sipping his champagne and chatting amiably with the passenger in 1B. His name, she had noted from the manifest, was Richard Sterling. He looked important. He fit the seat. The plane taxied for what felt like an unusually long time. The captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing a minor ground delay due to traffic, a common enough occurrence at JFK. Susan thought nothing of it. She was more concerned with the paperwork she'd have to file regarding the involuntary downgrade she had forced upon Marcus Thorne, a report she intended to fill with phrases like disruptive, non-compliant, and agitated. Richard Sterling, however, was not as relaxed as he appeared. Something about the incident at the gate had bothered him. The quiet, dignified fury of the man in the Tom Ford suit had stuck with him. He had overheard snippets of the conversation, words like confirmed ticket and my seat. He'd been pulled from the lounge and rushed on board so quickly he hadn't had time to process it. Now, sitting in the quiet of the cabin, the pieces felt wrong. He was Richard Sterling, a senior partner at Orion Capital Partners, one of the largest private equity firms in the world. And as it happened, Orion Capital held a 12% stake in Aerovista's parent company, making them one of its most significant institutional investors. Richard was on the board. He wasn't just a passenger. In a very real sense, he was one of the owners. He discreetly connected his phone to the plane's surprisingly fast Wi-Fi, a perk he had insisted the airline upgrade during their last board meeting. He sent a quick, encrypted message to his executive assistant. Look up the passenger manifest for AV 788. Who was originally ticketed for seat 1A? Urgent. A minute later, the reply came back. Marcus Thorne, CEO of Nexus Innovations. Richard's blood ran cold. Marcus Thorne. He knew the name, of course. Nexus was one of the hottest tech companies on the planet. Their IPO had been the stuff of legend. Thorne was a visionary, a brilliant strategist who was about to close a landmark deal in London. Richard's own firm had even considered trying to take a stake in Nexus, but Thorne had been famously resistant to outside investors, preferring to build his empire his own way. He looked at the empty space by the gate where Marcus Thorne had stood. The airline staff had kicked one of the most respected black CEOs in the world off their flight. Off his flight, and they had used him, a board member, as the unwitting instrument of that humiliation. The sheer suicidal stupidity of it was breathtaking. This wasn't a customer service issue. This was a multi-million-dollar, brand-destroying, lawsuit-generating catastrophe in the making. His thumbs flew across his phone's screen. His next message was not to his assistant. It was to Robert Maxwell, the CEO of Aerovista Airlines. Bob, I'm on AV 788, sitting in seat 1A. I have reason to believe your gate staff just illegally denied boarding to the confirmed passenger for this seat, Marcus Thorne of Nexus Innovations, based on his race. Fix this, now. He hit send. The message was a grenade, and he had just pulled the pin. Miles away in his corner office overlooking Dallas, Robert Maxwell was preparing to leave for the day when his personal phone buzzed with the unmistakable notification of a message from a board member. He read Richard Sterling's text, and the color drained from his face. Marcus Thorne, Nexus Innovations. He knew both names well. In fact, his corporate sales team had been desperately trying to land the Nexus account for months, a contract potentially worth tens of millions a year. The London merger was public knowledge. His heart hammered against his ribs. No, no, no. This couldn't be happening. He immediately dialed his head of airport operations at JFK. Dan, what the hell is happening on Flight 788? He barked, his voice trembling with rage. Why was Marcus Thorne removed from that flight? The operations manager, caught completely off guard, stammered, let me check, Mr. Maxwell. I see a note here, a seat duplication issue. Passenger was reaccommodated. Reaccommodated where? In a damn shipping crate? Robert roared. A board member is on that plane and says Thorne was kicked off. Find the gate agent and the purser for that flight and get them on the phone with me in 60 seconds. While Robert Maxwell was lighting up the phone lines to New York, another call was coming into his office. His executive assistant buzzed him. Mr. Maxwell, Sir Alastair Finch from Omni AI in London is on line 1. He says it's urgent. Robert felt a fresh wave of nausea. Omni AI was the company Nexus was merging with. Sir Alastair was the key to the very deal that Marcus Thorne was flying to London to close. This was a nightmare spiraling out of control. He took a shaky breath and punched the button for line 1. Alastair, what a pleasant surprise, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Cut the crap, Robert. Sir Alastair's voice was icy. I've just had a rather disturbing call from Marcus Thorne. He tells me your airline has some logistical issues. He tells me he's been forced to charter a private jet to make our meeting because your people wouldn't let him on the plane he paid for. Alastair, I can assure you, it's a misunderstanding we are clearing up right now. Is it a misunderstanding? Sir Alastair cut in. Because it sounds to me like blatant incompetence, or something far uglier. I'll be frank, Robert. We were about to sign a very lucrative corporate travel agreement with Aerovista for our new combined global operations. That deal is now off the table, permanently. I cannot have my company associated with an airline that treats its premium passengers with such contempt. We require partners who are reliable and whose corporate culture aligns with our own values of respect and integrity. Clearly, Aerovista is not such a partner. Goodbye. The line went dead. Robert Maxwell stared at the phone, his hands shaking. $100 million contract gone. Just like that, he slammed his hand on his desk. Get me Captain Miller on 788, he yelled to his assistant. Now, tell him to halt takeoff and return to the gate. I don't care if he's on the damn runway. Turn the plane around. Back on the plane, Captain Miller was just about to get clearance for takeoff when his cockpit communications crackled to life with an unprecedented order from the highest level of the company. Aerovista 788, this is dispatch with a message from the CEO. You are instructed to abort takeoff sequence. Return to gate 24 immediately. I repeat, return to the gate. Acknowledge. The captain and first officer stared at each other in disbelief. Returning to the gate after pushback, unless for a critical mechanical failure or security threat, was almost unheard of. It was a logistical nightmare and a costly delay. Dispatch, confirm message from the CEO, the captain asked, incredulous. Confirmed, Captain. Turn the plane around. With a heavy sigh, Captain Miller's voice came over the cabin intercom, strained and tight. Folks, this is your captain speaking. I apologize. Due to a gate issue we were unaware of, we are being instructed to return to our gate. We'll provide more information once we have it. A collective groan went through the cabin. Passengers who had settled in for the long flight were now confused and angry. In first class, Richard Sterling simply nodded to himself and took another sip of water. He had fired the shot. He could already see the shockwave spreading. Susan Price, who had been securing the galley, felt a lurch in her stomach that had nothing to do with the plane's movement. Planes didn't just turn around. She hurried to the front of the cabin, her eyes wide with panic, and saw Brenda standing on the jet bridge, her face pale and slack-jawed as the massive 7-7 slowly maneuvered back into its dock. The chaos Marcus Thorne had set in motion from a quiet corner of the terminal had now reached them at full force. The steel trap had sprung. The atmosphere at Gate 24 had transformed from bureaucratic indifference to one of pure high-level panic. As Flight 788 reconnected to the jet bridge, a phalanx of suits descended on the area. These weren't gate agents. They were Aerovista's JFK station manager, the regional vice president of operations, and two stone-faced individuals from corporate security. They bypassed the bewildered passengers entirely and boarded the plane. Their first stop was the cockpit, where a grim-faced Captain Miller was handed a phone with a direct line to CEO Robert Maxwell. The conversation was short and brutal. Their next stop was the first-class cabin. The regional VP, a harried man named George, approached Richard Sterling's seat with a look of profound apology. "Mr. Sterling, on behalf of Aerovista, I am so sorry. This never should have happened. We are taking immediate and decisive action." Richard looked at him coldly. "The action is a little late, George. Where is Mr. Thorne?" George swallowed hard. We're not sure, sir. He left the terminal. We're trying to locate him." "You didn't just lose a passenger, George," Richard said, his voice low and dangerous. "You publicly humiliated the CEO of one of the most important tech companies in the world, lost a $100 million corporate account, and exposed this airline to a lawsuit that will likely cost us 9 figures. Find him." Meanwhile, 2 other corporate managers had located Susan Price in the galley and Brenda Gable, who had been summoned onto the plane from the gate. The 2 women were escorted off the flight and into a small, windowless office just off the main concourse. The smiles were gone. The condescending attitude had evaporated, replaced by raw fear. "Brenda Gable, Susan Price," the station manager began, his voice devoid of any emotion. "You are both being placed on immediate, unpaid administrative leave, pending a full investigation into the events surrounding the denial of boarding of passenger Marcus Thorne." "But it was a system glitch," Brenda stammered, her voice cracking. "The seat was double booked." "Was it?" the manager asked, sliding a printed sheet across the table. "It was the seating manifest, time-stamped from 24 hours prior. Because our system shows Mr. Thorne checked in at 9 a.m. yesterday and was assigned seat 1A. It shows the seat remained assigned to him until 8:15 p.m. tonight, approximately 5 minutes after you spoke with him, at which point it was manually reassigned by your terminal ID to passenger Richard Sterling. There was no glitch, Ms. Gable. There was only your decision." Brenda's face crumpled. Susan Price sat beside her, rigid and white as a sheet. "Your system access is revoked. Your employee badges are suspended," the manager continued mercilessly. "You will be escorted from the premises. Do not contact any other Aerovista employees. A representative from Human Resources and our legal department will be in touch." They were summarily fired, though the airline used the term indefinite leave to manage the legalities. Their careers, built over decades of minor tyrannies and abuses of power, were over in less than 5 minutes. They had picked a fight with a ghost, a stereotype in their own minds, and had lost to a king. Back on the plane, the passengers were growing mutinous. The delay was now stretching past an hour. Finally, a new flight crew was brought on board, and a frazzled manager announced that all passengers would be receiving a $500 travel voucher for their trouble. But the real trouble was just beginning. David Chen, the Reuters journalist Marcus had called, had made his own inquiries. He got a tip from a contact inside Aerovista about a plane being turned around at JFK. He cross-referenced it with a source at Omni AI in London who confirmed their corporate travel contract had just been summarily canceled. The pieces came together. He wrote the story, and it hit the newswire just as European markets were opening. Aerovista Airlines in crisis mode. After Black CEO denied first-class seat, flight recalled to gate. The story was an explosion. It was picked up by every major news outlet. The video Marcus had taken, which Eleanor Vance had strategically leaked to Chen, went viral. It was damning not for what it showed, but for what it implied. The quiet dignity of his shoes on the carpet, the clear view of another man in his seat, it was a powerful, understated indictment. Aerovista shame and flying while black trended globally. By the time the sun rose over New York, the parent company of Aerovista Airlines, Global Air Holdings, saw its stock price plummet by 14% in pre-market trading, wiping out over $800 million in market capitalization. The cost of 2 employees' prejudice was fast approaching $1 billion. And Marcus Thorne? He was 35,000 feet over the Atlantic, not in the cramped confines of a commercial jet, but in the spacious cream leather interior of a Gulfstream G650. He had enjoyed a dinner of seared scallops and a glass of Montrachet, prepared by the jet's private chef. He had reviewed his presentation for the merger, taken a call with his children to wish them good night, and was now sleeping soundly in a fully reclining bed. He landed at London City Airport, feeling refreshed and focused. He was met on the tarmac by a waiting Bentley, sent by Sir Alistair. He arrived at the Savoy with time to spare, striding into the hotel lobby looking every bit the titan of industry he was. Over dinner, he and Sir Alistair finalized the last details of the acquisition. They didn't speak of the incident with the airline. They didn't have to. The news was already on the television in the corner of the bar, a silent testament to the events of the last few hours. The next morning, Marcus Thorne and Sir Alistair Finch stood before a wall of cameras and reporters and announced the successful merger of Nexus Innovations and Omni AI, creating a new global tech powerhouse. When a reporter asked him to comment on the AeroVista situation, Marcus was the picture of grace. "My focus today is on the future of our new combined company," he said, his voice smooth and steady. "As for the other matter, I can only say that it was an unfortunate customer service issue. I have full confidence that my legal team and the leadership at AeroVista will resolve it amicably. Every company at some point must face the consequences of its culture, good or bad." It was a masterful statement. He took the high road, while Eleanor Vance and her team of legal assassins prepared to take the low road, paved with subpoenas and depositions, all the way to the bank. AeroVista would end up settling with Nexus for an undisclosed sum rumored to be in the high eight figures, on top of issuing a groveling public apology and implementing a mandatory company-wide bias training program. Robert Maxwell, the CEO, would be forced to resign by his board within 6 months. Marcus Thorne never wanted an apology. He never wanted a voucher or a refund. He wanted something far more valuable. He wanted accountability. On a chaotic evening in New York, a few small-minded people had tried to put him in his place. In the end, they only succeeded in reminding the world exactly where his place was, at the very top. 6 months later, the fury of the news cycle had long since moved on, but the echoes of that evening at JFK continued to reverberate in the lives of everyone involved. The world had largely forgotten the hashtag, but the consequences were permanent, etched into careers, balance sheets, and personal lives. For Marcus Thorne, the incident had become more than just a bitter memory. It was a catalyst. The massive confidential settlement he received from AeroVista was, to him, blood money. He refused to let it be absorbed into Nexus's corporate profits. Instead, he used it as seed capital to launch the Thorne Ascendancy Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing legal resources and venture capital funding for minority and women-led startups. He now sat in a sleek glass boardroom, not his own, but the foundation's. Across from him, a brilliant young black woman, a software engineer with a revolutionary idea for AI-driven educational tools, was nervously finishing her pitch. She was sharp, passionate, and had been turned down by every traditional venture capital firm in the Valley. They saw her as a risk. Marcus saw her as the future. "Your proposal is exceptional, Ms. Davies," Marcus said, his voice warm and encouraging. "Your technical knowledge is impeccable. The Ascendancy Board will be in touch within 48 hours. He gave her a smile that reached his eyes, a smile of genuine respect. As she left the room, radiating a newfound hope, Marcus looked out the window at the city skyline. He didn't feel triumph when he thought of AeroVista. He felt a profound sense of responsibility. The world had given him power and a platform, and the ugly encounter at the gate had been a stark reminder that he had a duty to use it not just to build his own empire, but to level the playing field for others. That was the real victory. For Brenda Gable, there was no victory. There was only a crushing, unending defeat. After being fired, she discovered she was radioactive. The internet never forgets. Every job application she submitted, whether for another airline or even a retail management position, was met with silence or a polite, swift rejection. A simple background check revealed her as the face of the AeroVista shame scandal. She sold her home in the suburbs of New Jersey to pay her mounting legal bills and moved into a small, dreary apartment. She was last seen working a cash-in-hand job cleaning motel rooms, her face etched with a permanent bitterness. She told anyone who would listen that she was the victim, a scapegoat for a woke mob, never once acknowledging the prejudice that had authored her own downfall. Susan Price, the purser, chose a different path: erasure. She legally changed her last name, sold her condo, and moved to a small, anonymous town in the Midwest. She got a job as a bookkeeper for a local construction company, a quiet role where she didn't have to face the public. But the shame was a constant companion. She avoided eye contact with strangers. Her hands would tremble if someone spoke to her too sharply. And she lived in constant, low-grade fear that someone would recognize her from the news reports. Her professional pride, the very core of her identity for over 20 years, had been shattered, leaving behind a hollow, anxious shell of the woman she used to be. Aero Vista, under its new CEO, was a company humbled. The mandatory bias training was in full swing, a costly and humbling endeavor. Richard Sterling now chaired a newly formed board committee on corporate culture and ethics, wielding his influence to force genuine, systemic change. The airline's new slogan was "A Higher Standard," a constant public reminder of how low their standard had once fallen. They were slowly rebuilding, but the brand was forever scarred, a textbook case study in business schools on how a single moment of prejudice can cost $1 billion. And so, the fallout wasn't a loud explosion, but a quiet, cascading collapse. It was the inevitable result of a rotten corporate culture finally being held to account by the one person they never should have crossed. This wasn't just a story about racism. It was a story about power. The power of quiet dignity against loud ignorance, the power of strategic thinking over petty prejudice, and the ultimate power of consequences. They thought they were just putting a man in his place, but they ended up triggering a chain reaction that cost them their jobs, their company millions, and their reputation. A stark reminder that the person you underestimate might just be the one who owns the board you're playing on. What did you think of this story? Have you ever witnessed something like this happen? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story as compelling as I did, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to the channel for more true stories of justice and shocking real-life events. Thanks for watching.